Hey there, GAGCers. If you want to learn how to prototype in your classroom or even with your virtual students, you have come to the right place. The session today is called Prototyping with Paper and Cardboard. I am Julia Varnado. I am a gifted education specialist at Mount Bethel Elementary School in Cobb County, Georgia. There are 3 lessons included in this presentation. Prototyping 101, which is an introductory lesson, a cardboard model student make and take, and a prototype design challenge where students get to actually apply what they have learned. As far as demonstrating this with virtual students, I have included some information on using a document camera to do that. It is doable. You're definitely going to want to practice it first, and hopefully this can help you. And if not, I'm sure you're already an expert on all things virtual by now. So the first lesson, the introduction, is called Prototyping 101. It's an introductory lesson for students, just like the slide says. And you can start with this with your students. As you begin, we show a video. It's a 2-minute video where it's linked to YouTube on demonstrating prototyping. I'm not going to play it because I've actually had some technical issues, so suffice it to say, it's a great little introductory video for your students. All right, so what is prototyping? Prototyping is the process of creating a model of a solution, and you want to do it early on in the process so that you can demonstrate and test your ideas. It is iterative. That means it goes through many, many cycles. I often like to compare this with my students to the writing process or any other iterative process where you go through a series of steps and then you come back to the beginning to improve it. So it is iterative, and here are some examples of a handicap sign that was begun with paper and Christmas lights, and then they were added some other types of lights. And then they ended up doing this with RFID technology, and this actually won at the National Competition for Invention Convention. So as you are doing your prototype, you should be getting feedback from your users as you create each different prototype, and that feedback will be used to improve and make your next prototype. Rapid prototyping is just what it says. It's a very quick and inexpensive way to prototype. Many of you have access to 3D printers. I do not have that at my school, but I actually prefer to do rapid prototyping because my students can get a lot more product completed and get more feedback on it when they're using paper, cardboard, plastic, basically your recyclables. They can create the models quickly and get that feedback that is necessary for them to make changes. Paper and cardboard is inexpensive, and oftentimes when kids put a ton of work into a prototype, they are less likely to accept any feedback or want to change it. This is something that's especially true for our younger students. They don't want to iterate. They think it's perfect the way that it is. So paper and cardboard actually opens up that opportunity for them to make it not so perfect and to get out there and try some new ideas. Over here is a video on cardboard boxes and how they are made. It's a really, really interesting video because it really kind of shows how the layers of the cardboard are fabricated. And I thought it was super helpful for me in terms of deconstructing cardboard and paper when we were doing a lot of our activities in class. And the kids think it's really cool too. All right, so there's also a way for us to, a lot of kids like to do apps, and they like to have ideas for apps. And apps can absolutely be prototyped. I'm going to actually play this video because it doesn't have any sound, but you can see when I play it, as it is going through, you have a model of what this app might work like. And I've had several students do app prototypes like this, app prototypes with paper on iPads and for the phone, and they've really enjoyed that process. And we've also got, later in this presentation, there are some templates for you to use with your students if this is the direction that they want to head in. They've got a great idea for an app and they want to test it, so they can do it using these templates, which makes it a lot easier for them. There's also digital prototyping for apps as well. I've also had students do this. It's a little bit more complicated and would definitely be a challenge for your younger students, but it does do the trick and it kind of models what that app might look like. All right, so I'm going to show some prototyping examples here, and these just really help our students learn that they don't have to be perfect. Many of these models were made it to the state competition for K-12 Adventure. Some of these came from a summer camp that we did, but all of them do the job of showing exactly what the purpose of that prototype is. It's to give you a better idea of what the beehive or the car seat or the handicap sign should look like. And they don't have to be expensive. They shouldn't be expensive. And kids have a lot of fun making them as well. All right, so we also have some helpful tools that I definitely recommend for you to have in your arsenal of things to help you in terms of prototyping. Some of these are not appropriate for children, but you would want to have them so you can help them with it. This is a manual rotary cutter. Many of you are familiar with the rotary cutters that are used to cut paper and fabric. This one is made for cardboard and it just slices right through the cardboard. It's wonderful. This right here is a Works rotary cutter. I have to tell you, I have one of these in my classroom. I love it because if I want to cut up 5 or 6 boxes and just make a bunch of strips of cardboard that I can hand out to my students, it makes really short work of it. It's an automated rotary cutter here, and I think it was about $35, so it's not too much of an investment. Cardboard scissors are a definite must. You'll notice that they are angled, so it makes it easier to actually cut the cardboard. These are about $20 a pair, maybe a little bit less. I did include links to all of these items underneath if it's something that you're interested in purchasing for yourself or for your classroom. But the cardboard scissors are great. I only have one pair in my classroom and they stay at my desk, but my students are able to come up and use them if they want, and they are wonderful to have. They'll really save your hands. All right, so on the kids side, we have the Slice craft knife, and this is a ceramic knife, and it's technically supposed to be safer for children than your typical X-Acto knife over here, which easily can cut you. So these are a little bit harder to cut your skin. They are somewhat expensive, I think, for children to have. They're about $14 a piece, but if your students want to get them on their own and bring them into school or use them at home, it is a great recommendation for them to be able to do it on their own and safely. And next up is the Clever Cutter. This is probably one of my favorite tools. You can't really see it here, but there is a little tiny blade underneath each area of that hook. And what you do is you hold the blade here, you hold the handle here, and you hook that little hook underneath a piece of cardboard, and you just pull it towards you, and it cuts like butter. best of all, these are only like $1.50 to $2 a piece. So I do have a class set of these, and my kids love them so much they often go home and buy them for home use as well. All right, we also have your X-Acto knife, and this is just a box cutter. I like to have this. I definitely would not give this to children to cut with, but it helps me cut up boxes. Finally, having a heavy-duty hole punch is really great. As you'll see with some of our models that we use, punching holes in cardboard is a great way to create a pivot point and very easy to do, but kind of hard to do with a knife. So, and maybe a little dangerous as well. So I like to use the heavy duty hole punch. And finally, most teachers have these low temperature glue gun that'll help your children if they want to come up, your students, and they want to try to affix some things together. They can use their own glue, tacky glue, but having the glue gun makes it a little bit quicker to dry and helps them to move on to their finishing up their prototype. So something just to remember when you are prototyping, you want to fail early and you want to fail often, but you don't want to quit. And we used Thomas Edison here as an example because he was the king of failing often, but he also did not quit. And obviously, we have some wonderful inventions from him as a result. All right, so as you're going through this presentation with your students, after you introduce prototyping with them, you want to direct them to create an invention box. So in order to get your students ready for prototyping assignments, they need to have some materials. And what a great solution for this is to create an invention box. It does not have to be a fancy box, but your box will contain all of the materials that they'll be using to work with cardboard. And I'm going to show you those materials in just a moment on the next slide. But they are materials you should have around the house. If you don't have something, don't stress about it. And you will notice in this example here, I do have some of my cardboard pieces. This invention box was actually created when we were virtual, 100% virtual with our students. And it was actually wonderful to have the students have everything gathered the night before, the day before, so that that next day when we're doing our lesson and we're actually using the materials, they didn't have to go searching for something or explain to me why they didn't have it. As you transition into the face-to-face learning that we're in now, kids aren't going to be bringing this box to school. They might want to, but it's not very feasible to do so. But they can bring their tools in a Ziploc bag or something that can carry some of those tools. But having them in one place at the ready is the most important thing. All right, so here is the detailed list of the invention box materials. You need a container, cutting and measuring tools, strong tape, tacky glue if they have it. Some kids do, some kids don't. That's okay, whatever they have. If they just have regular Elmer's, that's okay too. If they have a low temperature glue gun, that is great to include, as well as a glue stick. Any kind of fasteners that they can kind of scrounge up around the house are wonderful. Brads, the brass brads, twist ties, pipe cleaners, wire, string. I always like to say just go hunt around your junk drawer in your recycling bin to see what you can come up with. Bamboo skewers are also a wonderful tool. They're a little sharp, but they're a wonderful tool when working with cardboard, and we'll show you how they're used a little bit later. And then for the next lesson, past this introduction, your students are going to need some cut cardboard pieces, some pre-cut pieces. They can have parents help them with this, or they can cut them themselves. If you're doing it in your classroom, I just cut a bunch of random pieces and hand them out because it's just a little easier. And we always have boxes to recycle at my school, as I'm sure that you do as well. All right, so this concludes our first part of lesson 1. And what you would say to your students is, get your invention box ready, get your materials ready for our next class. Next class, we are going to build. So lesson 2 is all about what we call a make and take. We're going to make cardboard models of different attachment techniques that will enable the students to have skill when they are trying to create a box or something that rolls or something that pivots or something that needs to stand up on its own. These things are wonderful for that. So students will be doing this. I'm going to go ahead and click here, and this will open up in another link. So after I've clicked on that link, it opens up a new document, a new slideshow. And so this is your second lesson. I would not do them together in one day. It's too much. This lesson, it really takes to do it well about an hour to 2 hours if you have that kind of time. The students really love getting into it and exploring the way that the materials move. And so if you're able to give them a little bit longer, then I think you'll find that it's a very rewarding experience for them and will pay off as well when they're doing their other prototyping. Okay, so whenever we begin one of these lessons, I'm going to always start with teacher notes. And the teacher notes just give you an idea of what is going on in this lesson before you start it with students. If there's stuff that you need to prepare or print or things to be aware of, I'm going to go ahead and put them in this notes section. And what this one says is to use the templates, which you're going to see in a moment, as a way for you to help create a display for your classroom. So you can do this. I actually have this display in my classroom and I love it. It took me a little while, I'm not going to lie. It took me a little while to do it, but it was really fun and my students refer to it all the time. So you can do one for yourself, or your students, as they're making models, can make their own display that they can either keep in the classroom or keep at home. I definitely use recycled materials, boxes that I can find in the hall pretty easily. Um, Also helpful on this is to use some spare cardboard underneath the cardboard you're cutting, so it helps protect your surfaces. If you have a cutting mat, that's great, but I recognize that not everybody might have that. So spare cardboard does the trick as well. So you're going to see the templates that can be printed. They can be printed on cardstock, or they can also be printed on plain paper and then used as a guide to mark cardboard. And we just kind of went through these options, so I'm going to just note a few things here. It's very important that they have their invention box for homework prior to the lesson so that they're prepared with the materials that they need. And if you do have younger students, they may require adult assistance in terms of cutting out cardboard or using some of the tools. You do not have to use cardboard for this. You can also use cardstock. It works just as well. It's a little harder to manipulate, but it's easier to cut, so there are some definite advantages to doing it. I've done it both ways. I've done it with cardstock and with cardboard, and it's great because the kids are actually able to manipulate it on their own. You are not standing over their shoulder doing it for them, which I know is really hard to watch sometimes, but they have to go through those frustrations and those experiences to really learn how to do it. So our next slide begins the focused lesson for our students. So this is where you would start lesson 2 with your students. And in lesson 2, we talk about today we will be using templates to make models of different attachment techniques. FYI, pro tip here, it's great for you to make your own models before you have to show them to your students. It just sort of helps you work through it. And then you can have something that you can show them, you can hold up or walk around and show it to them so that they have a better understanding of how things are going to work. We address the invention box here. And something I did not mention in the last discussion we had about the invention box is something I learned is there is a grain of cardboard. The corrugation has a grain, and you can kind of see it here. And the grain is a lengthwise grain. So if you cut on that lengthwise with that lengthwise grain, it is so much easier to cut. If you are cutting across the grain, it is bumpy and you're not going to get a straight cut, and you have to go over it several times to even make the cut go through. So just something that I like to teach my students right away. They do sort of see this in the video on how cardboard is made, but you can also demonstrate it to them. I like to walk around and say, show me where the grain is. They can also take a pencil, the side of a pencil lead, and sketch over the cardboard, and that grain will pop up because those ridges kind of pop up ever so slightly. And then we talk about the materials that they're going to be needing for the lesson that we're going to be doing. All right, what you've all been waiting for are the printable templates. So for each model that you're going to be making, I've included a template. I've done these in color. I've also done them in black and white. So whatever works for you. If you want to print them on paper, like I said, you can use a glue stick and glue them on top of cardboard and have exactly what you need for your cutout, or you can print them black and white on cardstock. Either way, it works. Okay, so a couple of things for you to make note of. The dashed lines, the long dashed lines, are cut marks, and the small dashed lines are scores. So a score is where you go about halfway through the cardboard, but not all the way through. And the scores make things really easy to fold. So you can see we've got cutting along the grain. That's our first example that I just talked about. And then on this one, you would score an outside fold, and this actually makes a triangle. And this is called an L brace, and the L brace is actually used with tape. And if you're ever not sure about how these things kind of come together, you can go back to click on this example, and you can see how each of them is formed. The L brace is the only one that actually uses tape, and I used whatever duct tape I could find in my room. All right, they also are going to make a flange, and if they have a toilet paper or paper towel holder, great. All they have to do is snip vertically a few times, and they'll be able to attach that flange to a flat surface. If they don't have that, I love showing my kids how to make their own paper towel toilet paper roll using just a piece of cardboard or cardstock, and snipping and making their own flange. Flanges are great because they offer the students an opportunity to build like a tower type thing when they're doing their prototyping, and it gives them a lot of opportunities to expand upon their ideas. All right, so we also have gusset and support. So this is kind of like the L brace where you score, but then we're going to add these triangular wedges in here so that it is supported. This is a really, really, really strong support. It is easier to do with hot glue because it dries quicker, but it can also be done with tacky glue. You're just going to need to be a little bit more patient in terms of holding on to it before it really gets tacky and dries. All right, so slots and tabs are also wonderful ways to attach cardboard. These two are just cut out. They don't have to be exact, but these slots are actually cut out. And it's not just snipped, there's just a little tiny channel in there that makes it go a little bit better. And when you wedge these two together, they form like a cross. Tabs are also awesome because they can create a wall for you. So you would score this line here, and you would cut each of these lines and then you fold the opposite tabs one way, the ones that you didn't fold go the other way, and you can glue that to a flat surface, and you now have a wall or a vertical surface. And tab and slot kind of goes along with the same lines. This actually sort of looks like a light switch when it's finished, but it can show you how you can actually have a projection coming off of a flat surface. All right, and then we get to our brass, whoops, I have moved ahead. Let me go back. There we go. Brass fasteners and pivoting. These are great. It's just cardboard and you hole punch it here, and you can use a brass fastener or you can use a pipe cleaner. You can even use a piece of string. And when the top is laid over the bottom piece, that top piece can pivot. Okay, so I mentioned skewers. This is probably one of my favorite things because I never knew you could do it until I started doing this. So I had mentioned that lengthwise grain of the cardboard, which you can see right here. A skewer is going to go right through that. And you can see right here where the corrugation is. So that skewer is going to go right in one of those channels. And this is great for flags types of things or things that need to be on a post and need to rotate. And then we also have hole punches and wire. So same idea where this piece goes over this piece and you can attach it with brads. You can also attach it with pipe cleaners. I think that's what I used in my wall display. But it enables you to open something up with a hinge. And finally, we have the curved form. This is more of an advanced form. So if you're dealing with older students, this is great for them. If you're dealing with younger students, you might want to supervise them a little bit as they're doing it because they would need to score at regular intervals along the grain to create a curved form. But what happens is when you do that and you bend the cardboard, it will make a cylinder for you. And students really like to try, a lot of my elementary students really wanted to try that one, and they were very successful with it. All right, so I promised you I also had the black and white printable templates. So these are great to have as well if you just want to print them out on cardstock or you don't have a color printer and you don't want to waste all that ink. Please note that all of these templates are sized for 8.5 by 11 paper. So once you print them out, you can just run them through your copier at school and you will be ready to go. The next lesson, lesson 3, is linked right here. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that and I will show you that lesson. I hope your kids enjoy lesson 2. My kids had a great time. Now we're on our third lesson, and this is the Prototype Design Challenge. And this is where your students have learned about prototyping in lesson 1. They've modeled how to attach cardboard and learn how to work with it in paper in lesson 2. And now they're going to apply all of that knowledge to actually design for a specific user. So to access that, we can just click right here. And as I mentioned in lesson 2, I'm always going to start with teacher notes. So what you need to do to prepare for this lesson is students will need to have their engineer's box with them, and they're going to need to have unlined paper, scissors, lightweight cardboard. You can use construction paper, but they're going to need some things to build with. I like to have all of my students have the same thing. So if I'm providing the materials and I'm handing out cardstock, I'm only going to hand out maybe 5 per table, and every table gets 5 because we want everybody sort of to be on the same level playing field. Because our students are going to be assigned to a specific user, you may want to use this checklist over here to help you organize which students are going to have which user. So the users that we're dealing with are from The Simpsons, and I have made user strips for you. These can be printed out and cut. And again, if I'm having a group at a table, maybe I have 4 people at the table, I definitely want to make sure they have different characters. I don't want them to have the same character because I want them to be thinking independently. So the user assignments list really helps me out with that. And if it can help you, fantastic. I like to do a Flipgrid reflection at the end of this assignment. So in terms of what you would need to do, if you are a fan of Flipgrid, then you may want to go ahead and populate a student reflection and get a join code for that. And then finally, there is a handout that they should be using as they go through the design challenge, because the design challenge, and you'll see in just a moment, is going to ask them to sketch for a minute and build for 5 minutes and then receive feedback and then go back and iterate. So this design challenge handout really helps them with that. All of these are linked right here for you. So that's prior to the lesson. And then when you actually start your student lesson, you would begin at this slide. And you'll tell your students for this challenge, you're going to design and build a prototype of a chair for a specific person. They will be assigned a person with unique problems and needs. As you learn about each user, think about at least 2 needs that your design needs to address and what style elements would appeal to your user. Your goal is to design a simple solution that meets the needs of that user. So let's meet our users. We have Grandpa, who is an old man. He's achy and grouchy. He has trouble getting around, so he walks with a cane. He also has difficulty getting into and out of his chair, though he sits in his chair most of the day. We have Ralph, who is a high schooler and spends 8 hours a day in class. Most of the time, he has to sit in uncomfortable chairs, sitting up and facing the front of the room. When Ralph moves between classes, he carries a large backpack. When he gets to class, he needs a place to put his stuff. Then we have Maggie. Maggie is a 1-year-old who loves to play and crawl around everywhere. Maggie likes to explore on her own and be independent while she sucks on her binky. When it's time for her to sit still, she gets whiny and squirmy. Next we have Neil, who is an astronaut and he travels to space. When he's in his spaceship, he's in a weightless environment. This is cool most of the time, but it's a challenge when he needs to sit down and drink his Tang. Neil also has a bulky spacesuit that often gets in the way. And finally, we have Lisa, who's a marathon runner who runs every single day. She hates being stationary, and because she exercises so much, she really has sore muscles. When she does sit down, it's really important that her chair be very comfortable and help her to relax and recover for her run the next day. So when you introduce this assignment, each student is going to have one of these strips. The direction is, using your own paper, identify at least 2 needs your design will need to address to meet the needs of your user. Let your teacher know when you finish by giving a thumbs up in the chat box or a thumbs up in the classroom. And if you are finished early and you're waiting for the next task, what style elements would appeal to your user? And here I've gone through, this actually dovetails with everything in the handout. And I've put in timers to make it easier for you to stay on track. So the first thing that they're going to do after they've answered that question is they're going to have a 5-minute timer to draw their chair. They can draw 1 to 3 sketches of their design. After that 5-minute timer goes off, they're going to have a 30-second share or a round robin. So what they'll do is they're going to share their sketch with another student, and how it addresses the design principles. And then they'll flip-flop and the other person will share theirs. Following that feedback, they're going to go back with a 1-minute iteration. So you're going to have 1 minute to incorporate the feedback and revise their sketch or design. You may find, as I did, that this may take more than a minute. So you don't have to stick to these times exactly, but they do give you a little bit of a framework to be able to add that time element, which I feel like is very important for kids when they're creating. It helps them really focus and get things done, and it's real life as well. All right, so after they have done their 1-minute iteration, then they're going to prototype. So they're only going to be using the materials in their engineer's box or / the materials that you have given to them, whether it's cardstock, if you gave them some pipe cleaners, whatever it is that you've given them, that is what they will use to make their first prototype. If they finish making their prototype, you can differentiate this lesson by having them incorporate more feedback and do another prototype, or you can do a challenge material. Maybe they get to pick one thing from your recycling box, piece of foam or a piece of cardboard or some skewer sticks, one thing, and go ahead and improve it with that one thing. So there's a lot of different ways that you can actually increase the challenge level of this assignment, especially as you are in the hands-on phase with the prototyping. And when that is finished, now it's time for a little class discussion and to wrap everything up. So you want to ask them what was challenging about making their chair. Did they use the feedback that they received to actually improve their design? Were they able to test their idea? And what changes would they make after seeing their prototype? Often, what we have in our mind and what we sketch is not what comes out when we build it. So these are great discussion questions to have a very rich discussion with your students. And then finally, if you would like to add a reflection, you can do this in Flipgrid or on paper. Think about your design as if you were your user. What would your user love about their new chair? What complaints would they have about their new chair? And then if you are using Flipgrid, there's an opportunity for them to provide feedback for other students if you so desire. And that wraps up lesson 3. Every time I do lesson 3, it takes me a lot longer than I think it's going to take me. But it's a wonderful experience and really prepares your students for future things where they're going to be using prototyping. Unfortunately, I can't ask you any questions that you might have regarding prototyping. If you have any, I've left my email address here for you. Please feel free to email me at julia.varnado@cobbk12.org, and I will answer any questions that you might have. And this assignment, just to say, it's not a clean, these lessons aren't clean necessarily. They're messy, and messy is good. You want to definitely resist the urge to jump in and help or to solve the problem for your students. You want them to be able to learn those skills. So this really works with our gifted students because many of them are perfectionists. And if you don't tell them exactly what they want to hear, they're going to ask you 15 different questions because they want to get it perfect. This is an imperfect activity. And so it really does push our perfectionist kids out of their comfort zone. And also our kids who are not perfectionists, it gives them a chance to really be creative and explore that as well. I have included at the very end the lessons here if you need them. And I've also included another copy of the Helpful Tools site with all the links. And then finally, some templates here. These are your templates for this, the app templates that I had mentioned. And then also if you click here on the attachment techniques, that will get bigger and you can actually see how they work. I hope this has been helpful for you, and I would love to hear if you do implement this in your classroom. I would love to get some feedback on how it went or anything that could be done to improve it. But I encourage you to get messy and jump in and see what your kids can do. Thanks so much.